An Acceptable Time by Madeleine L'Engle. Under their feet, the ground seemed to tremble. Polly O'Keefe has recently moved in with her grandparents, the famous scientists Alex and Kate Murry, when she wanders into a time 3,000 years before her own. Perhaps it's not an accident, as she is told by two druids. When a gate between circles of time opens, it opens for a reason. When the gate closes behind Polly and her gravely ill friend Zachary, the reason becomes clear. In this desperate time, can Polly keep herself and Zachary alive until the gate reopens to bring them home? An Acceptable Time is the fifth book in Madeleine L'Engle's classic Time Quintet. Chapter 1. She walked through an orchard, fallen apples red and cidery on the ground, crossed a stone wall, and wandered on into a small wood. The path was carpeted with leaves, red, orange, gold, giving off a rich, earthy smell. Polly scuffed along, pushing the toes of her running shoes through the lavish brightness. It was her first New England autumn, and she was exhilarated by the colors drifting from the trees, dappling her hair with reflected amber and bronze. The sun shone with a golden haze through a muted blue sky. Leaves whispered to the ground. The air was crisp but not cold. She hummed with contentment. The trees were young, most no more than half a century old, with trunks still slender, completely unlike the great Spanish moss-hung water and live oak she had left less than a week before. Apples from a wild seedling had dropped onto the path. She picked one up, russet and a bit misshapen. But the fruit was crisp and juicy, and she wandered on, eating and spitting out the seeds. Now the path led her toward a forest of much older trees, towering maples, spruce, and pine. Reaching above them all was an ancient oak with large serrated leaves of a deep bronze color, many still clinging tenaciously to the branches. It was very different from the southern oaks she was used to, and she had not recognized it as one until she learned her mother and uncles had always called it the grandfather oak. When we first moved here, her grandmother had explained, most of the oaks were gone, killed by some disease, but this one survived, and now our land is full of young oaklings, all evidently disease-resistant, thanks to the grandfather oak. Now she looked at the oak and was startled to see a young man standing in its shadows. He was looking at her with lucid blue eyes, which seemed to hold the light of the day. He wore some kind of white garment, and one hand was on the head of a tan dog with large pricked-up ears outlined in black. The young man raised his hand in greeting, then turned and walked quickly into the forest. When she reached the great tree, he had disappeared from sight. She had thought he might speak to her, and she was curious. The wind had risen and played through the pines, sounding almost like the rolling of the breakers on the beach of Bed-Seed Island, off the coast of South Carolina, where her parents still were, and which she had left so short a time ago. She turned up the collar of the red anorak she had taken from the generous supply that hung on pegs outside her grandparents' kitchen door. It was her favorite because it fitted her well and was warm and comfortable, and she liked it because the pockets were full of all kinds of things. A small but very bright flashlight, a pair of scissors, a notepad, and a leather binder with a purple felt pen, an assortment of paper clips, safety pins, rubber bands, a pair of dark glasses, a dog biscuit. For what dog? She sat on a gray flat glacial rock known as the Star-Watching Rock and looked up at white clouds scudding across the sky. She sat up straighter as she heard music, a high, rather shrill piping of a folk melody. Who was it? Who was making music out here in the middle of nowhere. She got up and walked, following the sound, past the grandfather oak in the same direction as the young man with the dog. She went past this oak, and there, sitting on a stone wall, was another young man, this one with lustrous black hair and skin too white, playing a penny whistle. Zachary! She was totally startled. Zachary Gray! What are you doing here? He took the whistle from his mouth and shoved it into a pocket in his leather jacket, rose from the wall, and came toward her, arms outstretched. Well met by sunlight, Miss Polly O'Keefe. Zachary Gray, at your service. She pulled away from his embrace. But I thought you were at UCLA. Hey, he put his arm around her waist and hugged her. Aren't you glad to see me? Of course I'm glad to see you. But how did you get here? Not just New England, but here at my grandparents'. He led her back to the wall. The stone still had warmth from the autumn sun. I called your folks in South Carolina, and they informed me you were staying with your grandparents, so I drove over to say hello, and they, your grandparents, told me you had gone for a walk, and if I came out here, I'd probably find you. His voice was relaxed. He seemed perfectly at home. You drove here from UCLA? He laughed. I'm taking an internship semester at a law firm in Hartford, specializing in insurance claims. His arm about her waist tightened. He bent toward her, touching his lips to hers. Mwah! She drew away. Zach, no. I thought we were friends. We are friends. I thought you found me attractive. I do, but not yet. Not now. You know that. Okay, Pa, but I can't afford to wait too long. Suddenly, his eyes looked bleak. His lips tightened. Then, deliberately, he gave her one of his most charming smiles. At least you're glad to see me. Very glad. Yes. Delighted, in fact, but totally surprised. She was flattered that he'd gone to the trouble to seek her out. She had met him in Athens the previous summer, where she had spent a few days before going to Cyprus to be a gopher at a conference on literature and literacy. It had been an incredibly rich experience, full of joy and pain, and in Athens, Zachary had been charming to her, showing her a city he already knew well, and driving her around the surrounding countryside. But when he had said goodbye to her in the airport after the conference had ended, she had never expected to hear from him again. I can't believe it! She smiled at him. Can't believe what, Red? Don't call me Red, she replied automatically. That you're here. Look at me. Touch me. It's me, Zach. And what are you doing here? Going for a walk? Staying with your grandparents. I'm studying with them. For a few months at any rate. They're terrific. I gather they're famous scientists or something. Well, granted, Nobel Prize laureates. She's into little things, subatomic particles, and Granddad's an astrophysicist and knows more about the space-time continuum than almost anybody except Einstein or Hawking. You always were, Brain, he said. You understand all that stuff? She laughed. Only a very little. She was absurdly glad to see him. Her grandparents were, as she had said, terrific, but she hadn't seen anyone her own age and hadn't expected to. So, why are you doing this instead of going to school at home? He asked. I need lots more science. I need lots more science than I could get at Coopertown High, and getting to and from the mainland from Bennessee was a real hassle. But that's not the only reason. Isn't it enough? It would have to be enough for Zachary, at least for now. She looked away from him, across the star-watching rock, to an autumn sky just turning toward dusk. The long rays of the sun touched the clouds with rose and gold, and the vivid colors of the leaves deepened. A dark shadow of purple moved across the low hills. Zachary followed her gaze. I love these mountains, so different from California mountains. Polly nodded. These are old mountains, ancient, worn down by rain and wind and time itself. Perspective making. Do you need perspective? Don't we all? A leaf drifted down and settled on Polly's hair. Zachary reached out long, pale fingers and took it off. It's the same color as your hair. Beautiful. Polly sighed. I just began to be reconciled to my hair. Given a choice, I wouldn't have chosen orange. It's not orange. Zachary let the leaf fall to the ground. It's the color of autumn. Nice, she thought. How nice he can be. This is the first time I've seen autumn foliage. I've always lived in warm climates. This is, I don't have any words. I thought nothing could beat the ocean, and nothing does, but this... It has its own glory, Zachary said. Pop's living in Sausalito now, and the view from his house can overwhelm all that incredible expanse of Pacific. But this, as you say, gives perspective and peace. Your grandparents, he continued, offered tea and cinnamon toast if I could find you and bring you back. Sure. She jumped down from the wall. As they passed the grandfather oak, she asked, Hey, who is that blue-eyed guy I saw here a few minutes ago? He looked at her. I thought he was someone who worked for your grandparents, a caretaker or a gardener or something like that. She shook her head. You mean they take care of this whole place themselves? Yes, well, a neighboring farmer hates the fields, but he's older, and this man was young, and he didn't look like a farmer to me. Zachary laughed. What do you think a farmer looks like? I grant you, this guy had a kind of nobility. Did you talk to him? No, and that was, as I think about it, a little weird. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and I was going to say something, but he gave me this look as though he was totally surprised to see me. I mean, totally. And then he turned and walked into the woods. He had this big-eared dog with him, and they just took off, not running. But when I looked, I didn't see them. He shrugged. As I said, I thought he must be a caretaker or whatever, and a lot of those types are sort of surly. Do you suppose he was a poacher? Do you have pheasants or quail? Both, and our land is very visibly posted. It's not big enough to be called a game preserve. Most of the old farms around here were 100 acres or less, but my grandparents like to keep it safe for the wildlife. Forget him, Zachary said. I came out here looking for you, and I found you. I'm glad, really glad. She smiled at him, her most brilliant smile. Ready to go? Sure. I think your grandparents are expecting us. Okay, we'll just go back across the star-watching rock. Star-watching rock? She stepped onto the large flat glacial rock. Patches of moss grew in the crevices. Mica sparkled in the long rays of the descending sun. It's always been called that. It's a wonderful place to lie and watch the stars. It's my mother's favorite rock from when she was a child. They crossed the rock and walked along the path that led in the direction of the house. Zachary walked slowly, she noticed, breathing almost as though he had been running. She shortened her pace to match his. Under one of the wild apple trees scattered across the land, the ground was slippery with wrinkled brown apples, and there was a pungent cidery smell. Inadvertently, she moved ahead of Zachary and came to a low stone wall that marked the boundary of the big field north of the house. On the wall, a large black snake was curled in the last of the sunlight. Hey! Polly laughed in pleasure. It's Louise the Larger. Zachary stopped, frozen in his tracks. What are you talking about? That's a snake! Get away! Oh, she won't hurt us. It's only Louise. She's just a harmless black snake, Polly assured Zachary. When my uncle, Sandy, and Dennis were kids, you met Sandy in Athens, he didn't approve of me. Zachary stepped back farther from the wall and the snake. It wasn't you, Polly said. It was your father's conglomerates. Anyhow, there was a snake who lived in this wall, and my uncles called her Louise the Larger. I don't know much about snakes. Zachary retreated yet another step. They terrify me. But then, isn't the snake incredibly old? Oh, she's probably not the same one. Granny and I saw her sunning herself the other day, and she's exactly like the old Louise the Larger, and Gran said there hasn't been a black snake like Louise the Larger since my grandparents left home. It's a crazy name. Zachary still did not approach, but stayed leaning against a young oak by the side of the path, as though catching his breath. It's a family joke, Polly thought. Zachary knew nothing about her family except that it was a large one, and she knew nothing about him except that his mother was dead and his father was rich beyond her comprehension. Louise later. Ready? His voice was unsteady. I'm not walking past that snake. She won't hurt you, Polly cajoled. Honestly, she's completely harmless, and my grandmother said she was delighted to see her. I'm not moving. There's a tremor in Zachary's voice. It's really okay, Polly was coaxing. And where you have snakes, you don't have rats, and rats carry bubonic plague, and... She stopped as the snake uncoiled slowly, luxuriously, and slithered down into the stone wall. Zachary watched, hands dug deep into the pockets of his leather jacket until the last inch of tail vanished. She's gone, Polly urged. Come on. She won't come out again? She's gone to bed for the night. Polly sounded her most authoritative, although she knew little of the habits of black snakes. The more tropical snakes on Benicia Island were largely poisonous and to be avoided. She treasured her grandmother's assurance that Louise was benign, and so she crossed the wall and then held out her hand to Zachary, who took it and followed tentatively. It's okay. Polly tugged at his hand. Let's go. They started across the field to what Polly already thought of as home, her grandparents' house. It was an old white farmhouse which rambled pleasantly from the various wings that had been added throughout the centuries. Like most houses built over 200 years ago in the windy part of the world, where winters were bitter and long, it faced south, where there was protection from the prevailing northwest winds. Off the pantry, which led from the kitchen to the garage, was a wing that held Polly's grandmother's lab. Originally, when the house had been part of a working dairy farm, it had been used as a pantry in which butter was churned, eggs candled. To the east was a new wing added after Polly's mother and uncles had left home. It held an enclosed swimming pool, not very large, but big enough for swimming laps, which had been strongly recommended for her grandfather's arthritis. Polly, like most children brought up on islands, was a swimmer, and she had established in only a few days her own pattern of a swim before dinner in the evening, sensing that her grandparents liked to be alone in the early morning for their pre-breakfast swim. In any case, the pool was large enough for two to swim in comfortably, but not three. The downstairs rooms of the old house had been opened up so that there was a comfortable L-shaped living room and a big rambly area that was kitchen / sitting room / dining room. Polly and Zachary approached the house from the north, climbing up onto the tiered terrace, which still held the summer furniture. I got to help Granddad and get back into the cellar for the winter, she said. It's too cold for sitting outdoors for meals. She led Zachary toward the kitchen and the pleasant aromas of cooking and an applewood fire. 4 people were sitting around the oval table covered with teacups and a plate of cinnamon toast. Her grandmother saw them and stood up. Oh, good. You did find each other. Come on in. Tea's ready. Zachary, I'd like you to meet my old friend, Dr. Louise Calubra, and her brother, Bishop Nathan Calubra. The bishop stood up to shake hands with Zachary. He wore narrow jeans and a striped rugby shirt, and his thinness made him seem even taller than he was. He reminded Polly of a heron. He had strong, long hands and wore as one treasured possession a large gold ring set with a beautiful topaz, an elegant contrast to his casual country clothes. Retired, he said, and come to live with my little sister. Little indeed, in contrast to her brother. Dr. Louise was a small-boned woman, and if the bishop made Polly think of a heron, Dr. Louise was like a brown thrush in her tweed skirt and cardigan. She, too, shook hands with Zachary. When Kate Murry calls me her old friend, I wonder what the old refers to. Friendship, of course, Polly's grandmother said. Dr. Louise! Polly took her place at the table, indicating to Zachary that he should sit beside her. We saw your namesake. Not the original, Louise the larger, surely. The doctor took a plate of fragrant cinnamon toast and put it in front of Zachary. I'm sorry, Zachary stared at the doctor. What's your name? Louise Calubra. I get it. Zachary sounded triumphant. Calubra is Latin for snake. That's right. Polly looked at him admiringly. Zachary had already shown himself to have surprising stores of knowledge. She remembered him telling her, for instance, that Greek architecture was limited because the Greeks had not discovered the arch. She went to the kitchen dresser to get mugs for herself and Zachary. My uncles named the snake after Dr. Louise. But why Louise the larger? The bishop smiled. Louise is hardly large, and I gather the snake is larger, at least for a black snake, than Louise is for a human being. Polly put the mugs on the table. It's lots easier to explain Louise the larger with Dr. Louise here than back of the stone wall. A kettle was humming on the wood stove, its lid rising and falling. Polly's grandfather lifted it with a pot holder and poured water into the teapot. Tea's pretty strong by now. I better set it down. He put the kettle back in the stove, then poured tea for Polly and Zachary. The bishop leaned across the table and helped himself to cinnamon toast. The reason for unceremonious visit, he said, swallowing, is that I found another one. He pointed to an object which sat like a loaf of bread by Polly's grandfather's mug. It looks like a stone, Polly said, and so it is, the bishop agreed, like any stone from any stone wall, but it isn't. Look. Polly thought she saw lines on the stone, but they had probably been scratched as the old wall settled or frost or frost heaved in winter. But Zachary traced the stones with delicate fingers. Hey, is that Ogham writing? The bishop beamed at him in delight and surprise. It is, young man, it is. How do you know about it? One of my bosses in Hartford is interested in these stones, and I've been going so stir-crazy in that stuffy office that I've let him rattle on to me. It's better than medical malpractice suits. Dr. Louise stiffened, and it is interesting to think maybe people were here from Britain, here on the North American continent, as long ago as, 3,000 years. And you flunked out of all those fancy prep schools, Polly said wonderingly. He smiled, took a sip of tea. When something interests me, I retain it. He held out his cup and Polly refilled it. She put the teapot down and tentatively touched the stone. If it's a petroglyph, the bishop held himself to more cinnamon toast. And that's Ogham writing. What does it say? If I'm translating it correctly, something about Venus and peaceful harvest and mild government. What do you think, young man? Zachary shook his head. This is the first Ogham stone I've actually seen. My boss has some photographs, but he's mostly interested in theory. Celts and maybe druids actually living with and probably marrying the natives. Polly looked more closely. Very faintly, she could see a couple horizontal lines with markings above and below them. Some farmer used this for a stone wall and never even noticed. Her grandmother put another plate of cinnamon toast on the table and removed the empty one. The fragrance joined with that of the wood fire in the open fireplace. 200 years ago, farmers had all they could do to eke out a living. And how many farmers today have time to explain the stones that get heaped up in the spring? Her grandfather asked. Still our biggest crop, Dr. Louise interjected. Polly's grandfather pushed his glasses up his nose in a typical gesture, and if they did see markings on the stones and realized they weren't random, they wouldn't have had the faintest idea what the markings were about. His wife laughed. Did you? He returned the laugh. Touché. If it hadn't been for Nace, I'd continued in ignorant bliss. Dr. Louise smiled at him. Your work does tend to keep your head in the stars. Actually, Louise, astrophysicists get precious little time for stargazing. Where did you find this rock, Nace? Mrs. Murry sat at the table and poured herself some tea. In that old stone wall, you have to cross to get to the star-watching rock. Louise the Larger's wall, Polly exclaimed, thinking that it was natural that the bishop should know about the star-watching rock. It had been a special place for the entire Murry family, not only her mother. The bishop continued, the early settlers were so busy clearing their fields, it was no wonder they didn't notice stones with Ogham markings. Ogham is an alphabet, Zachary explained to Polly. A Celtic alphabet with 15 consonants and some vowels with a few other signs for diphthongs or double letters like NG. Ogum, however, the bishop added, was primarily an oral rather than a written language. Would your boss like to see the stone? He dropped his teeth. Zachary grinned, but I'm not going to tell him. He just come and take over. No way. He looked at his watch, stood up. Listen, this has been terrific, and I've enjoyed meeting everybody, but I didn't realize what time it was, and I've got a dinner date back in Hartford, but I'd like to drive over again soon if I may. Of course. Mrs. Murry rose. Anytime. The only people Polly has seen since she's been here are the four of us antiques. You're not? Polly started to protest. But her grandmother continued, there aren't many young people around, and we've worried about that. Do come any weekend, Mr. Murry urged. Yes, do, Polly agreed. I don't really have to wait for the weekend, Zachary said. I have Thursday afternoons off. He looked at Polly and she smiled at him. Okay if I drive over then? It's not too much over an hour. I could be here by 2. Of course. We'll expect you then. The Murry grandparents and Polly accompanied Zachary out of the kitchen, past Mr. Murry's lab, and through the garage. Zachary's small red sports car was parked next to a bright blue pickup truck. Mr. Murry indicated it. Nathan's pride and joy. He drives like a madman. It's very pleasant to have met you, Zachary, and we look forward to see you on Thursday. Zachary shook hands with the Murrays. Kiss Polly lightly. Mwah! What a nice young man, Mrs. Murry said, and they went back into the house. In the kitchen, the bishop echoed her. What a delightful young man. How amazing, Mr. Murry said, that he knows about the Ogum stones. Oh, there have been a couple of articles about them in the Hartford papers, Dr. Louise said, but he does seem a charming and bright young man. Very pale, though. Looks as if he spends too much time indoors. How do you know him, Polly? Polly squatted in front of the fire. I met him last summer in Athens before I went to the conference in Cyprus. What's his background? He's from California, and his father's into all kinds of multinational big business. When Zachary bums around Europe, he doesn't backpack. He stays in the best hotels. But I think he's kind of lonely. He's taking time off from college? Yes, he's in college a little late. He didn't do well in school. Because if he's not interested, he doesn't bother. A half-grown kitten pushed out of the cellar, stalked across the room, and jumped into Polly's lap, causing her to sit back on her heels. So, where have you been, Hadron? Polly scratched her striped head. Dr. Louise raised her eyebrows. A natural name for a subatomic physicist's cat. The bishop said mildly, I thought it was a variant of Hadrian, or we were mispronouncing it, Mrs. Murry suggested. He sighed. I suppose it's a name for a subatomic particle or something like that? Dr. Louise asked. Kate, why don't you and Alex get another dog? Ananda lived to be 16. We haven't been that long without a dog. This house doesn't seem right without a dog. That's what Sandy and Dennis keep telling us. Mr. Murry turned from the stove and began drawing the curtains across the wide kitchen windows. We've never gone out looking for dogs. They just seem to appear periodically. Polly sighed comfortably and shifted position. She left her grandparents and the Calubras because they affirmed her, made her believe in infinite possibilities. At home on Benestein Island, Polly was the eldest of a large family. Here she was the only one, with all the privileges of an only child. She looked up as her grandfather hefted the Ogum stone and set it down on the kitchen dresser. 3,000 years, he said, not much in galactic terms, but a great deal of time in human terms. Time long gone, as we limited creatures look at it. But when you're up in a space shuttle, ordinary concepts of time and space vanish. We still have much to learn about time. We'll never leave the solar system as long as we keep on thinking of time as a river flowing from one direction into the sea. He patted the stone. You found other Ogham stones? Polly asked. I haven't. Nace has. Nace, Polly might well be able to help out with the translations. She is a positive genius for languages. Polly flushed. Oh, Granddad, You speak Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, and French, don't you? Well, yes, but... And did you study some Chinese? Now she laughed. One day, maybe. I do love languages. Last summer, I picked up a little Greek. Mrs. Murry lit the 2 kerosene lamps which flanked the pot of geraniums on the table. Polly's been modest. According to those who know, her parents, her uncles, her ability with languages is amazing. Then, to Polly's relief, she changed the subject. Louise, Nace, you will stay for dinner, won't you? The doctor shook her head. I think we better be heading for home. Nace drives like a bat out of heck at night. Now, really, Louise, Mrs. Murry said, I have a large mess of chicken and vegetables simmering over the Bunsen burner in the lab. We'll be eating it for a week if you don't help us out. It does seem an imposition. You're always feeding us. The bishop offered, we'll do the dishes tonight and give Polly and Alex a vacation. It's a bargain, Mr. Murry said. Dr. Louise held out her hands. I give in. Alex, Kate... She indicated the Ogham stone. You really take all this seriously? Mr. Murry replied, oddly enough, I do. Celts, druids, and all. Kate is still dubious, but we've been forced to take even stranger things seriously. Mrs. Murry headed for the door. I'm off to get the casserole and finish it in the kitchen. Polly shivered. It's freezing in the lab. Gran was showing me how to use a gas... chromatography this morning, but icicles trickled off the end of my nose and she sent me in. Uncle Sandy calls me a swamp blossom. Dr. Louise smiled. Your grandmother's machinery is all for show. Her real work is up in her head. I couldn't get along without the Bunsen burner. Why don't you go for a swim, Polly? You know the pool's the warmest place in the house. It was Polly's regular swimming time. She agreed readily. She loved to swim in the dark by the light of the stars and a young moon. Swimming time, thinking time. See, in a bit, she stood up, shaking a reluctant Hadron out of her lap. Up the back stairs. The first day, when her grandparents had taken her upstairs, she had not been sure where they were going to put her. Her mother's favorite place was the attic, with a big brass bed under the eaves, where her parents slept on their infrequent visits. On the second floor was her grandparents' room, with a grand 4-poster bed. Across the wall was Sandy and Dennis, her uncle's room, with their old bunk beds, because on the rare occasions when the larger family was able to get together, all beds were needed. There was a room which might have been another bedroom, but which was her grandfather's study, with bookshelves and a scarred roll-top desk and a pull-out couch for overflow. Then there was her Uncle Charles Wallace's room, her mother's youngest brother. Polly had a rather blank feeling that there was no room in her grandparents' house that was hers. Despite the fact that she had 6 brothers and sisters, she was used to having her own room with her own things. Each of the O'Keefe children did, though the rooms were little bigger than cubicles, for their parents believed that, particularly in a large family, a certain amount of personal space was essential. As they climbed the stairs, her grandmother said, we spruced up Charles Wallace's room. It isn't big, but I think you might like it. Charles Wallace's room had been more than spruced up. It looked to Polly as though her grandparents had known she was coming, though the decision had been made abruptly only 3 days before she was put on the plane. When action was necessary, her parents did not procrastinate. But the room, as she stepped over the threshold, seemed to invite her in. There was a wide window which looked onto the vegetable garden, then on past a big mowed field to the woods, and then the softly hunched shoulders of the mountains. It was a peaceful view, not spectacular, but gentle to live with, and wide and deep enough to give perspective. The other window looked east, across the apple orchard to more woods. The wallpaper was old-fashioned, soft blue with a sprinkling of daisies almost like stars, with an occasional bright butterfly, and the window curtains matched though there were more butterflies than in the wallpaper. Under the window of the east wall were bookshelves filled with books and a rocking chair. The books were an eclectic collection, several volumes of myths and fairy tales, some Greek and Roman history, an assortment of novels from Henry Fielding's Tom Jones to Matthew Maddox's The Horn of Joy, and on up to contemporary novels. Polly pulled out a book on constellations with lines drawn between the stars to show the signs of the zodiac. Someone had to have a vivid imagination, she thought, to see a great and little bear or Sagittarius with his bow and arrow. There was going to be plenty to read, and she was grateful for that. The floor was made of white cherry wood boards, and there were small hooked rugs on either side of the big white pine bed, which had a patchwork quilt in blues and yellows. What Polly liked most was that although the room was pretty, it wasn't pretty. Charles, she thought, would have liked it. She had turned to her grandmother. "Oh, it's lovely. When did you do all this?" Last summer, her grandparents had no idea that Polly would be coming to live with them. Nevertheless, she felt that the room was uniquely hers. "I love it. Oh, Grand, I love it." She had called her parents, described the room. Her grandparents had left her to talk in privacy, and she said, "I love Grand and Granddad. You should see Granddad out in his red tractor. He's not intimidating at all." There was laughter at that. "Did you expect him to be?" "Well, I mean, he knows so much about astrophysics and space travel, and he gets consulted by presidents and important people. But he's easy to talk to. Well, he's my grandfather, and I think he's terrific. I gather it's mutual. And Gran isn't intimidating either." Her parents, she could visualize them, her mother lying on her stomach across the bed, her father perched on a stool in the lab, surrounded by tanks of starfish and octopus, both laughed. Polly was slightly defensive. "We do call her Gran, and that sounds pretty imposing." "That's only because you couldn't say grandmother when you started to talk." "Well, and she did win a Nobel Prize." Her father said reasonably, "She's pretty terrific, Polly, but she'd much rather have you love her than be impressed at her accomplishments." Polly nodded at the telephone. "I do love her, but remember, I never really had a chance to know Gran and Granddad. We lived in Portugal for so long, and Benacete Island might have been just as far away. A few visits now and then hasn't been enough. I've been in awe of them. They're good people," her father said. "Talented, maybe a touch of genius, but human. They were good to me, incredibly good, when I was young. It's time you got to know them," her mother added. "Be happy, Polly." She was happy as a small child. Not that she wanted to regress, to lose any of the things she had learned from experience, but with her grandparents she could relax, completely free to be herself. She grabbed her bathing suit from the bathroom and went along to her room. Downstairs she could hear people moving about, and then someone put on music, Schubert's Trout Quintet, and the charming music floated up to her. She left her jeans and sweatshirt in a small heap on the floor, slipped into her bathing suit and a terry cloth robe, and went downstairs and out to the pool. She hung her robe on the towel tree, waited for her eyes to adjust to the dim light, then slid into the water and began swimming laps. She swam tidily, displacing little water back and forth. She flipped onto her back, looking up at the skylights and welcoming first one star, then another. Turned from her back to her side, swimming dreamily. A faint sound made her slow down, a small scratching. She floated, listening. It came from one of the windows which lined the north wall from the floor up to the slant of the roof. She could not see anything. The scratching turned into a gentle tapping. She pulled herself up onto the side of the pool, went to the window. There was a drop of about 5 feet from the window to the ground. In the last light, she could just see a girl standing on tiptoe looking up at her, a girl about her own age, with black hair braided into a long rope which was slung over her shoulder. At her neck was a band of silver with a stone, like a teardrop in the center. "Hi," Polly called through the dark glass. The girl smiled and reached up to knock again. Polly slid the window open. "May I come in?" the girl asked. Polly tugged at the string till it too opened. The girl sprang up and caught the sill, pulling herself into the room, followed by a gust of wind. Polly shut the screen and the window. The girl appeared to be about Polly's age, and she was exotically beautiful, with honey-colored skin and eyes so dark the pupils could barely be distinguished. "Forgive me," the girl said formally, "for coming like this. Corrales saw you this afternoon." She spoke with a slight accent which Polly could not distinguish. "Corrales?" "Yes, at the oak tree with his dog. Why didn't he say hello?" Polly asked. The girl shook her head. "It is not often given to see the other circles of time, but then Corrales and I talked and thought I should come here to the place of power. It seemed to us that you must have been sent to us in the strange and difficult." She broke off as the door slammed somewhere in the house. She put her hand to her mouth, whispered, "I must go, please." She seemed so frightened that Polly opened the window for her. "Who are you?" But the girl jumped down, landing lightly, and was off across the field toward the woods, running as swiftly as a wild animal.